You're listening to A Radio.
Thank you for joining us. You're listening to A Radio, and this is the Morning Moment. We are on Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 11:45 Eastern. Follow us on Spreaker.com and click on the like button. You can find us on most social media platforms such as iTunes, Spotify and iHeartRadio. Go to our website, aradio.wordpress.com, for details, where you'll find more content and details on our podcasts and more. This piece is about an MP that I've mentioned before, not because I like this particular person any more and any less than anyone else. It's purely because I like what he says. I like what he says and how he says it, to a point, that is. If I was in the position that he is in, quite frankly, it is very unlikely that I would be anyway. Don't think there's a chance in hell, to be honest with you. But I certainly wouldn't be as polite as he's being. He's talking about the state of affairs in Alberta. Now, I want not just Canadians, but Americans to hear the level of desperation that citizens of this province, the province of Alberta, are at, the level of desperation that they've reached. This is not a joke, and for folks that I was chatting to the other night in a chat room, and they know who they were, this is really happening right now, March 2020 in Canada. And I want to be as clear as I possibly can. I want to be crystal clear and unambiguous about this. What you're going to be listening to here is a direct result of what we call in Canada Liberals, their actions and their policies. By that I mean their insane policies of the federal government of Canada that is currently controlled by the Federal Liberal Party of Canada. To my American friends, Liberals in Canada would make Bernie Sanders look right-wing. The federal Liberals in Canada are systematically destroying the oil and gas industry, first in provinces and then in subsequent provinces where applicable, forcing what Democrats are desperate to force upon Americans, that of carbon tax on everything you consider part of your daily lives, at the same time destroying our economy. In addition to that, their socialist ideas and ideals, as you will hear, spread well beyond stopping us using our own natural resources, or even being able to get them to market to sell them abroad, if not being consumed at home. No, it's far more insidious than that. I want you to listen for yourself and make your own mind up. The piece is from Pierre Poliver, the person I've done clips from before. It's in the House of Commons this time, which is rather more significant than some sub-building, because the House of Commons is Parliament itself in Canada. Here it is. The clip comes from his Twitter page, which is dated February 25, so it is reachable at the moment. This should scare any American who's even thinking of flirting with socialism, let alone Canadians who have to endure it.
I will be splitting my time with the honourable member for New Brunswick Southwest. Madam Speaker, there is a war on the working men and women of this country. You don't believe me? Just ask the 7,000 would-be workers at the now cancelled Tech Frontier mine in northern Alberta. If you don't believe me, ask the thousands of workers who would be on site now finishing the construction of the Northern Gateway pipeline. If you don't believe me, ask the 200,000 out-of-work Canadian energy employees who sit staring at their phones waiting for it to ring with a job offer across northern Alberta. If you don't believe me, ask the more than 20% of young males in the province of Alberta who are unemployed and desperate for opportunity. If you don't believe me, then go and speak to the 14 First Nations communities around the perimeter of the Tech Frontier mine, whose leaders had signed agreements for that mine to provide opportunities for their young people to escape the clutches of poverty. If you don't believe me, then talk to the steel workers who would have provided steel for the Energy East pipeline that is now cancelled, ensuring that the insanity of selling our oil on the cheap in the West while buying it at a premium in the East will go on for an indefinite period of time. If you don't believe me, go look at the footage of the fitness instructor in Victoria, BC, who arrived at a blockade and begged protesters, saying to them over and over again, "I've got to get to work. There are 40 people who are expecting me to teach a class. Can you please get out of the way and let me do my job? I don't even know what your political cause is about, but surely it can't be about blocking a middle-class fitness instructor from going to work." If you don't believe me, ask any of those thousands of people if there is a war on the working men and women in this country. And let's be clear about what this dispute is not about. It is, first of all, not about the environment. The blockaders who are stopping the Coastal GasLink pipeline, many of whom think it's an oil pipeline, wrongly, don't even know what they're protesting, are standing in the way of the construction of the pipeline and the LNG Canada plant, which would ship Canadian natural gas to China and other Asian markets to replace coal-fired electricity and reduce global greenhouse gas emissions by some estimates as much as 30 million tons per year. Wow. That's because natural gas emits half the greenhouse gases for each unit of electricity that it generates versus coal. Canada's perfectly positioned to reduce global emissions by shipping our natural gas. Why? We have 1,220 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. We have a cold climate, which makes it easier to cool and therefore liquefy and transport natural gas. Yeah. We supply our LNG facilities with clean, green, emissions-free British Columbia hydroelectricity. And we are closer to the Asian market, significantly closer than the Gulf of Mexico, which would be our principal competitor. In other words, we are perfectly positioned to ship clean, green Canadian natural gas and reduce global emissions. But these blockaders don't want us to. They would rather see coal combustion in Asia pump millions of tons of greenhouse gases into our atmosphere, coal being the single biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions anywhere on planet Earth. But these protesters would like to continue to see dirty foreign coal as long as it demobilizes our population and prevents our people from getting to work. No, it's nothing to do with the environment, nor was it anything to do with the environment when they, along with the help of this government, shut down the Tech Frontier mine, which had agreed to zero net greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. In fact, the company has already lowered its emissions to below the intensity of other competitors around the world. That oil will still be produced, it will still be burned, it will just come from outside of Canada. Now, it is not about the environment. You know what else it's not about? First Nations land rights. When it comes to the Coastal GasLink, 20 elected councils for First Nations had supported and signed agreements to profit from and benefit from that gas link. They all support it. In terms of the hereditary leadership, many of them too support it. In referenda by local communities, there has been overwhelmingly support for these projects which the blockaders are standing in the way of. And with respect to the Tech Frontier mine, there are 14 First Nations communities around the mine. You know how many, Madam Speaker, support the project? All 14. Wow. The cancellation of that mine went not only against the wishes of the regulator, which recommended its approval, of the Alberta government, which has supported it, but all 14 First Nations communities. So no, it is not about First Nations land rights. In fact, it is very clear that the cancellation of this project did not have the free, prior, and informed consent of those First Nations communities. The protesters and ultimately this government that killed that project went directly against the wishes of First Nations people. No, First Nations are being used as an excuse by anti-energy and anti-working class protesters and their friends in this government, by downtown urban dwelling liberal elites who look down on the working class people of this country. You don't believe me? Look at the Prime Minister's own remarks. He said he wants to phase out Canada's energy sector. He didn't say he wanted to phase out global petroleum. He said he wanted to phase out Canada's oil sands. He's not concerned about increased production in the United States, where oil production has more than doubled in the last 12 years. He's not concerned about increased oil and gas production in Saudi Arabia, in Venezuela, in Libya, and other places. Those places can go on producing and burning oil. It is Canadian oil and gas he wants to phase out. But it's not just oil and gas. He said he believes southwestern Ontario should move away from manufacturing. He said that when he was abroad at a fancy conference that he thought construction workers bring negative gender impacts to rural communities. That is the attitude of the downtown internationalist, globalist elite who look down their noses on the working people of this country. Well, Madam Speaker, I will conclude on an optimistic note. Canadians are proud of working class people, and they are increasingly prepared to stand up and fight back. I believe that we will have a renaissance of the working class in this country when we remove the government obstacles that stand in their way, unleash the unmatched power of free enterprise, remove the obstacles so that projects can go ahead and our industries and our energy sector can come roaring back to life, to give those young people the opportunity to put their God-given talents to work, to give Indigenous people the opportunity to work, to trade again in commerce, to exploit natural resources again in our country. And I say again because that had been the tradition of First Nations people for thousands of years before Europeans came here and arrived on this continent. Madam Speaker, that is the future that we will fight for as a Conservative opposition, and it is the future that Canadians together with us will win for our country. Thank you.
Questions and comments?
So I just wanted you to hear one piece again. You should all recognise this garbage, certainly if you live in the United States. This PC, diversity, gender-neutral crap that these liberal communists spew out day after day after day are destroying our nation, are destroying the will of the people to work, to provide for their families, because they're just trodden upon day after day after day. They're talked down to if they don't go to universities. They're talked down to if they don't live in an urban combine. They're talked down to if they don't drive an electric roller skate. They're talked down to if they don't ride a train or a bus, but drive a truck and go to work in a car and work in a factory and work on a farm and get their hands dirty. These people are sick. They are actually mentally sick. They're perverse, they're perverted, and they're sick. We all know it. None of you are prepared to say it. They are very, very disturbed individuals who think it's more important to have an ethnic balance on a construction site than have the right person on the construction site, or even to have a construction site at all. Yet they're the ones bringing in millions and millions of refugees that who are going to pay for? That magic fairy in the sky. It's going to rain down millions of dollars. Or is it a printing press? Either way, it's unsustainable. But listen to that clip again and you make your mind up. Are these people insane or just dangerous? Or both?
Should move away from manufacturing. He said that when he was abroad at a fancy conference that he thought construction workers bring negative gender impacts to rural communities. That is the attitude of the downtown internationalist, globalist elite who look down their noses on the working people of this country.
You can find more at aradio.wordpress.com, where you can find links to us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Gab, Spotify, and email. We're on Spotify under the podcast section. Type in Canadian Politics with a twist and you'll find us. We are continuing to reach out to you, so please pass these links on to your friends. Please click on the follow button on Spreaker.com. You can listen to all our morning moments at Spreaker.com/A-Radio. EHRADIO, A Radio. And please click on the like button. Join us Monday, Wednesday and Friday at 11:45 Eastern and tell your friends and pass the word. We only tell the truth, not what the mainstream media want you to know.